Mr. Speaker.
Kelvin Davis.
Tēnā rā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tuatahi māku hei whakapuaretia aku kōrero e tautakungia I ngā mihi kia rātu ko whetūrangi tia. Me te maharatia hoki I taua kōrero rārangi maunga tu I te ao, tu I te pō, rārangi tangata ka ngaro, ka ngaro, ka ngaro. Nā reire ko taua kōrero ka tūhonohono tātou te hunga ora ki o tātou whenua. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to acknowledge, first of all, the acknowledgements that Te Oriro Flavel had to our departed. He raised a whakatauki, and I also started off with another whakatauki that says a line of mountains will stand day and night, a line of people will fall, will fall, will fall. And in that way, we acknowledge our connection as those who are living to the land. Mr. Speaker, as Meka Whaitiri has so eloquently said in her speech, the Labour Party is going to oppose this bill. And let me just say that we oppose it because somebody needs to speak for all of our constituents across Te Tai Tokerau, Meka Whaitiri's constituents across Te Ikuroa Rāwhiti, Pēni Henare's constituents through Tāmaki Makaurau, many of them who are absent landowners, Nanaia Mahuta's constituents through Waikato Taunui, Adrian Rudaf's constituents through Te Taihaua Reno Tirikātene's constituents through Te Waipounamu, and even the Minister's constituents through Waiariki. Because, Mr. Speaker, I've seen through a lot of the documentation the claim that there has been broad-based support for this bill. Now, there's broad-based support for this bill depending on who you're talking to in Māoridom. So let me tell you now about the consultation hui. There were 22 since in February of this year, of which Labour had representation at 14 of those 22. Let me tell you about the two that I attended, one in Kaikohe and one in Whangarei. The one in Kaikohe, there's about 100 people. I got there, the hui had already started, and all I saw was a line of officials talking at the people. The people around me didn't know and didn't understand what was being said. They couldn't comprehend it. I believe that there were workshops where a 64-page document was handed over. This is separate from the consultation hui. The 64-page document didn't include the 370-page bill. That's right. And I ask, how are the people of Tai Tokerau, of Tāmaki Makaurau, of Waiariki, of Te Waipounamu, Taihaua, all our constituents, how are they meant to understand what this bill means for them? They don't understand. They were spoken at, I should say. And of course, it could only happen in Ngāpuhi. They jumped up. These are the people that were there criticising, yelling, shouting, and basically they told them, some guy behind me said you can stick that bill where the sun doesn't shine. Now, of course, he was a ringing from down south because Ngāpuhi, we don't speak like that. But the reality is, that's the extent of the feeling of the people in regards to this bill. So that afternoon I went down to Whangarei and the minister turned up and he addressed the hui. And I have to say I rang him afterwards to say good on you for turning up and fronting the bill. The reality is the reaction at the Whangarei hui was no different to the reaction at the Kaikohe hui, where there was about 120 at the Whangarei hui. And again, there were motions from the floor asking for this bill to be thrown out. There were people jumping up and down. It was basically chaos. And those are the people that we're standing up and speaking for who do not understand what this bill is going to do for them.
Oh, come on.
The thing is that the minister hasn't articulated to them a case for change. He hasn't articulated so that they understand what's going on. So if you can't articulate a case for change, then how are you expected to get people, Mr. Speaker, if a case for change isn't articulated, how are people meant to understand whether it's good or bad for them? So the way to do it would have been to go in with the bill and break it down into little groups and get people to explain. I mean, the way that the consultation hui were held, so it was just one big forum, and people didn't really have the opportunity to ask the in-depth questions and to get a personal reply. That's one of the things that needed to happen in order for people to understand exactly what is in this bill. But that didn't happen. See, how are people like forestry workers, freezing workers, linesmen, people working in the warehouse and pack and saves, beneficiaries, how are they meant to access a copy of this bill? How are they meant to spend time to try and go through it and engage with it, sit down with people and ask questions around it, even just engaging with their whānau? How are people up in Taitokere all meant to print out a copy of this bill and then to pull it apart and really work out what it means? They didn't have the opportunity, and having a bank of officials standing there explaining why this is going to be so good for you without them actually understanding how it's going to be good for them, or even if it's going to be good for them, it just doesn't work. So we're standing up when we're talking for our constituents, the people who voted us in and whose voices we need to represent and whose thoughts we need to reflect on this. So there hasn't been a case for change as to how the 1993 Act, why it doesn't work, because as Meka Whaitiri said, there are any number of Māori trusts and corporations who are doing perfectly fine. They're doing very well. We've got a $40 billion Māori economy under this Act, and there are all of these Māori trusts and corporations that are doing really, really well. So if it's a matter of capacity and capability, why don't we address the capacity and capability? If it's a matter of leadership, why don't we address it? If it's a matter of governance, why don't we address it? But instead, we're changing this bill, and the Minister said that it requires a wholesale change. Why couldn't it just be the parts that needed to be amended, be amended? Nobody is convinced that, sorry, I shouldn't say nobody. Those who are convinced that there's a need to change operate in that sort of Māori corporate level, but the people who we represent, the vast majority of Māori, the broad base of Māoridom, the people at the bottom of the Māori pyramid, not the people at the top, they don't understand what this bill is all about, and they see it as a bit of a land grab, whether it is or not. That's how they see it. And that's what I say, we're reflecting the voices of our people, because we mix it with the people in the streets. You know, how the people in Kaitaia or Kerikeri, Kaiō, Kaikohe, Kaiwaka, Tāgavul, they don't understand. The people of Mototo, they don't understand it. You know, if there were a handful of people from Mototo at the engagement hui, and Putaparanu was at the engagement hui's with me, if there were a handful of people from Mototo, do they understand it? Are they any wiser after attending the consultation hui? Mr. Speaker, the Waitangi Tribunal came out with 16 recommendations. I've seen and hear 5 of those recommendations have been addressed. Now, Māori have a lot of time for the Waitangi Tribunal. They've got a lot of respect for the Waitangi Tribunal. The Waitangi Tribunal doesn't always come out on the side of Māoridom, as we've seen with the TPPA recently. But they look forward to this, to these recommendations, and they would like to have seen these recommendations actually changed and enforced. But only 5 of them have had any changes made to them, Mr. Speaker. You know, it shows that the voices of the people aren't actually being heard. Not properly, and not the real changes that people want to see haven't been made. As I say, Mr. Speaker, there hasn't been a case for change really articulated. I disagree with the fact, or I disagree with the assertion that there's a broad base of support for this. Because when we're talking to the people in our communities, out on the streets, they don't see the case. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this bill shouldn't pass. I get the feeling it will go onto select committee. And there I hope that everybody out there listening and watching who has concerns actually does submit and make the changes. so that it does meet their needs and that they can be satisfied that it's good for them and their whānau and their whenua. Kia ora.